Hello everyone and welcome to episode 5 of the Mind, Body, Soul Transformation Podcast. We are a week late for this episode, and that is because last Sunday when I had planned and put aside the time to record this podcast, I very unexpectedly lost my 17-year-old cat, which was obviously deeply heartbreaking to myself and my beautiful family. And so I've spent the last week sitting with that, processing that, grieving that, and doing so alongside my beautiful family. So I have, instead of going on my usual Saturday morning run, decided that this was the best chance to get this recording in, hopefully uninterrupted, although my phone's already been ringing, so we will see how we go. There are two things that I want to speak about this week, and it's interesting that by delaying the podcast a week, there's been some further examples of the topics I want to talk about come up during the week, and so that's helpful that I'll be able to bring those examples into today's podcast. And those two topics are the things that have allowed me or helped me connect with my intuition, or more so maybe not connect with, but trust my intuition, because that's hard. I've spent the last 4 episodes talking about how important it is for us to connect with that inner voice and to make decisions and lead our lives from that inner voice, that inner knowing, our intuition. And I worry that I've presented that as if that's an easy thing to do. Not that the decisions are easy. I don't think I've given any false beliefs there, but more so that trusting that voice is easy to do. And so I do want to share some of the things that have helped me in confirming that I'm on the right path. And then the other thing I want to share is a bit around just how scary it is, at least for me, and in conversations I've had in the last week for others as well, to be open and vulnerable and risk established connections by sharing your spiritual journey. And it's interesting that I want to bring this to episode 5 of this podcast, because when I started this podcast, and as you all know, this was very much intuition driven, I thought the plan for this podcast, the intention for this podcast of the universe or whoever was guiding me to do this, was to very carefully, slowly, gradually introduce my community, the community that I've established through the Mind, Body, Soul Transformation page over the last decade, into the idea of following your intuition, into the idea of being open to the unknown and questioning the systems and structures that we exist in. And what I'm being called today to share, and even in last week's episode to share, is not how I thought I'd be presenting that information. I really am diving deep and just laying it all out there and being very authentic in where I'm at, what I'm learning, and the fact that I'm still learning. All of us always are, but I'm very early on in this path for me. But I'm feeling this push to share that really openly and vulnerably. So we're going to dive into those two things. Now, to start with, this idea of following your intuition, or following that inner voice and inner knowing. And I've shared over the last few episodes about how for me, when I was making a decision or sitting in a place of alignment, I was calm and at peace inside. And that was a big cue for me, particularly probably a few months into this journey of knowing, this is where I'm meant to be, this is it, and then finding that next step and taking that next step. And the trap there for us is that our intuition and our ego often want two different things. Our ego may be looking to protect us. It may be looking to keep us safe, or it might be looking, and maybe this is the same thing actually, it might be looking to present ourselves in particular ways to those around us. In fact, I think that is the same thing. And so there is an element of fear there, and a different kind of fear than that which comes from following your intuition, because when we're following our ego, we're making a decision from a place of fear. When we're following our intuition, yes, what we might be doing, it might be scary, but it is the act of doing that is scary, not making a decision from that place to protect ourselves. And so I think that's the first thing that I really want to separate, is that feeling of, is this my intuition versus is this my ego? And the other thing with making a decision from our intuition or from listening to our intuition, from my personal experience, is there's not a rush. Like, you can be stressed about it, absolutely, but there's not this urgency to do something. And again, that's that urgency from, I need to keep myself safe, I need to present myself in this particular way to those around me, and if I can't make this decision right now, then I'm not able to do those things. Whereas, particularly for the bigger decisions that I've been led to make from my intuition, some of those decisions took 6 to 12 months to make. And a big part of that wasn't that it necessarily needed to take that long. A big part of that was me not trusting that voice inside was the truth, was the right thing I was meant to do, was the path that I was meant to be following. And that's because some of those decisions were big, scary, hard decisions that broke my heart. And so what I want to share is the things that helped me navigate that, because it wasn't all just me sitting and meditating and going, having this idea drop into me and knowing that that's what I needed to do and taking that next step. I'm finding that easier now, although the things I'm finding it easier for are smaller decisions, like doing a podcast and deciding what we're going to talk about. But particularly at the start, when I first started grappling with this and first started feeling this dissonance between where I was and where I was meant to be, and that energetic tension that I was feeling, there was fear there. There was questioning there. Am I self-sabotaging myself? Is this really real? Am I going to regret this decision? And why am I feeling this way? Shouldn't I just be grateful? All those things that we've discussed already in the previous episodes. And so, in terms of being open to messages from the universe, I think in some ways I've never been completely cut off from that idea. You know, I think this is true of many in my circle around me, are fairly comfortable, at least playfully so, with the idea of going and seeing a psychic, going and seeing a tarot reader, reading your weekly horoscopes. There's some openness to those ideas that have always been around us, and that's been true for me as well. And so that has been a tool that I've used at different points in my life, is reaching out to someone that might be able to give me some clarity, some guidance using their own spiritual gifts. I didn't do that at the start of some of these big decisions, but what I did start to do was to look for similar things that I could more easily have access to, that almost could provide me a bit of that guidance daily. And so some examples of that were probably tarot readings or card pullings coming up in my Instagram feed firstly, and then I started to look at YouTube for those kind of readings as well, and looking for readings that might have resonated with me, be that based on my star sign, be it a pick a card type of reading, that the title of the reading resonated for me. I really quite heavily, and possibly now in hindsight too heavily, relied on that to give me some guidance around making sense of how I was feeling, making sense of what I was feeling called to do, or how I was feeling discomfort in where I was. And by delving into that, by opening up to that, and by looking for some reassurance that I could trust what was going on inside for me, then I started to come across ideas that I hadn't previously heard of, and other ways that I could get signs from the universe. It didn't mean I needed to rely on someone else bringing those messages in, but ways that the universe could bring me signs in my daily life to help me know that I was on the right track. And a big one of those for me has been angel numbers. And to be honest, it's not something that I'd really heard of before. I do recall a show years ago where it was about a group of people that kept seeing 111 or maybe 4 ones, I'm not sure, and that had a message and meaning in it at that point in time in that show. And I had seen those numbers since that show a few times and thought, oh, that's interesting, you know, it's popped up at various points along the road. But it wasn't until I came to understand what angel numbers were, what they meant, and how I could use them, did I really start to recognize how often angel numbers pop up for me in my day-to-day life, and still do every single day. And so the idea of angel numbers is usually repeating numbers, sometimes sequences of numbers that you can recognize as you go about your day-to-day that might have a message there for you. And when I first heard the idea, what I would often do is I might see 222 and then I would go and Google what does 222 mean and see if there was a message in there that resonated for me. I've now got some sense of what most of those angel numbers mean already, but much more so how I use angel numbers now and how they're working for me now as a message from whoever it is, my spirit guides, my past loved ones, from the universe, to let me know I'm on the right track, is exactly that. If I see an angel number, then I either just know that's reassurance from spirit, from the universe, from source, whoever, that I'm on the right track, I'm where I'm meant to be. The other thing I try and reflect on in that moment is, what was I just thinking about? Where was my mind at this point in time? Because if that angel number has come up for me, there might be a message in what I was just thinking about. And a beautiful example of this that possibly also links into the next part of this podcast is, this week I was drawn to send a message to my family about my grandmother who has passed, and her being with me a lot lately. In my dreams, just feeling her energetically around me, having her actually be in the room with me in a recent energy healing. And so I'd had a dream the night before I was out for my morning run, and as I was doing my warm down, I just had this feeling, this inner knowing, that I was meant to send a message to my family to let them know that she is always with us. That's exactly the message that came through in my dream, that she's always in connection with me. And so I started writing out this message, and I put language around it like, this might sound a little bit crazy, but I just feel Nana wants you to know that she's always with us, and I'm really sorry if this has upset you, but she's with me a lot lately, and I'm feeling called to let you know she's also with you all. And the interesting part there is, even when I was writing that message, is my grandfather, my poppy, also popped in and basically sent the message like, you need to include me too in this message. I'm also with them, which I totally know, and I can feel him too. It's just my connection with my Nana right now is really, really strong. Anyway, I'd written this message, and that in itself is terrifying to me, because me 12 months ago would have been like, what do you mean? What do you mean you're getting messages from Nana? I've always known in some way that she was with me, but I haven't felt it this strongly. And I would have never articulated it that strongly, that she's really here. She's really here supporting me. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. She's really here supporting us all at this point in time. And so because I'd been out on my run, I'd had music playing, and I had paused the music too once I got through the door, and I'd written this message, and I just was like, oh, this is being really vulnerable, even to send this to my family and to be this open with where I'm at spiritually and the things that I'm connecting with spiritually was vulnerable. They might have judged me for what I was about to share with them. And so I said, universe, I need a sign right now that I'm meant to do this, which just goes to show how hard it is to trust your intuition, because I had a message directly from my Nana that this was what I was meant to do. and I still needed confirmation that send the message, Donna. And I looked down at my phone, which had gone out of the message and was just on the home screen with the music that I was playing paused, and it was paused at 1:11 at the time, and the remaining time was 2:22. And so there on the screen I had 2 angel numbers. In fact, I think the time was also an angel number, and I was like, oh, okay, message received, universe. I'm pressing send on that message. And so I did send it, and at least externally, so the message was well received. And so I just share that because angel numbers have been a huge part of helping me trust my intuition, helping me trust I'm on the right path, and helping me make some of those more challenging, vulnerable decisions. And so there might be something there for you. You might already be noticing angel numbers, or you might start noticing them now that your attention's been raised to them. Just again, it's that what if. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen if you are open to receiving a message from the universe in that way? If you look down at your phone today and you see it's 4:44, why don't you go look up what that means? Why don't you think about what's happening in your life right now, or what's happening in your life at that moment? What were you just thinking about? And just go, is there a message there for me? And you can take it or leave it. I'm not asking you necessarily to jump in and make huge, big decisions off that, but just start connecting with that, because like all of the things that we've spoken about, the more we can use these practices, these messages, these tools to help us with the small things, to connect with our intuition, to connect with our inner knowing, the more we can use them in the big moments when we really need to. And I just get the sense that we've all got some big moments coming up, and that's a big part of the point of this podcast, is to get the message out there to those that might not have another bit of their algorithm getting this message to them, to try and get people to start thinking these things and start connecting with their inner knowing and intuition. The other thing we can do is actually ask for signs from the universe. And I've done this a few times, particularly where I might have had that message come in, had that inner knowing, had intuition that just keeps repeating itself. I might have had the angel numbers, I might have had other signs, and it might still be a really big decision. And I might still be really scared to do it, and I might be still really scared to trust myself in doing it. And so what I've done then is ask for signs from the universe. And for me, that's often feathers. It has been particular animals. It has been rainbows. I've heard of people using things like coloured objects out in the world, umbrellas, gumboots, those kind of things. So you can say, Spirit, if my inner voice is telling me this, if I'm meant to take a next step towards this, please show me whatever you want it to be today. And that has happened every single time that I've asked for it, because as long as I've asked that question from a place of intuition, not from ego, then I've got the message loud and clear from the universe that, that's the next step that I'm meant to take. The other way that has shown up for me is in some of these readings that I still watch online occasionally. There will be particular animals or signs mentioned in those, like feathers, like dragonflies. What's some recent examples? A hawk. I saw a video recently and it said something about, if you see a hawk, this message is for you. And then I was driving to work the next day, I think, and there was a hawk circling on my drive to work. So there's so many ways that the universe and spirit guides and our past loved ones are trying to connect with us and talk to us and send us the message that we need to help reconnect with this very buried part of ourselves. Some other things that I've used, because I started delving into the tarot and oracle readings online, I actually bought my own tarot and oracle cards, and I don't use these daily just because I actually for me, I can see that becoming a vice, something that I need to rely on to connect with my intuition. I'm trying to do that much more openly and directly than needing to pull cards every day to get a message from the universe about what I'm meant to be doing. But I will pull them out when I'm called to. I now have a bunch of different tarot and oracle decks, and I'll use my intuition to know which ones I'm meant to use. Sometimes mid card pull, I'll be asked to change decks, and I'll change decks accordingly. So there might be tools out there like that for you as well that you could start to use, you know, again with that idea of me. And I still do connect with external psychics and tarot readers and so on and so forth. But we've also got the ability to access that, where my understanding is, and I haven't opened to these myself, is that we all have access to these gifts. And by doing the work, we can slowly unravel and peel away the layers that are stopping us from accessing them. So that might be something else that you also want to take. And of course, things like meditation, messages during meditation that come in. Dreams are a big one. I really struggle to remember my dreams, but I am getting a bit better with this. And I now keep, at advice of someone else in this space, I now keep a dream journal next to my bed, so that if I wake up in the middle of the night and I've had a dream, I can quickly jot that down really messily, and I can come back to it the next day. And just by having that little bit of enough information to then start to dive into what had happened, then I can start to unpack if there was a message or meaning in that dream for me. Another big one for me, and I just need to get better at doing this daily, is journaling. What I'm finding is, if I sit down and journal these days, if I can just get into the flow, messages come out that I just cannot possibly be from my brain. They just can't. They've got to be from that inner voice at the very least, if not from a higher source. Because it's just not how I think, it's not how I sound, but these beautiful heart-led, heartfelt messages come out in my journal. And I've always struggled with journaling. This is probably one of my, not even probably, this is one of my limiting beliefs, that I'm not good at writing. And so journaling in the past, when I've tried to practice it, has been met with a lot of resistance. And I've really struggled to put onto paper what I thought I was meant to put there. And I've used different prompts and stuff, and that just hasn't worked. And a practice that has helped me in this space is just starting and committing to writing 3 pages. Even if it's 3 pages of rubbish, just getting in that flow of, I have to write 3 pages. And it's just started coming out of me. And I find this easier after meditating, and this is where I need to use it more, when I'm really starting to feel emotional about something, feel some emotions rising about something, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, actually using my journal to process what that is, actually laying it out there. Because what I'm prone to doing is either trying to squash that back down and get on with my day, or rationalizing those emotions, where what I need is to get to the heart of those emotions and just be completely open, honest, and vulnerable with it. And that's really hard to do in any other context. Even when you're talking to someone else, there might be things that you're just not comfortable saying, truths that you're just not comfortable putting out into the world. And so a journal is a beautiful place for that, to connect with your inner truth, but also maybe connect to messages from a higher source. The last couple are all about things happening within your external environment that might have messages for you. Songs are a beautiful example of this, particularly if you have a random playlist going or you happen to be listening to the radio. And we've all probably had that experience of listening to the radio and hearing a song that reminds us of someone. For me, it is Live It Up, and that is my song that is a connection to my grandparents, again my nana particularly. And so I've always known, and it brings me to tears every time it happens, that when I hear that song, she was with me. I've always known that, even before recently, where I can actually now feel her there with me. And I now believe that is the truth. You know, those songs are coming across our path at that particular time with a message. It might be a past loved one trying to come through for you. It might be a reminder of someone that isn't past, but a message to you about that person. Is it you need to reach out to that person, they need you right now, or you need them right now? Or is it someone that maybe you don't want to reach out to, but there's something still there that you need to work through? There's some healing to do in that space. So songs are a huge one, as are conversations, and I'm trying to get better at tapping into this, but the idea that you can be walking down the street, walking through the shopping centre, sitting at a cafe, and overhear a snippet of conversation that has a message in it for you, and that relates to something that's happening in your life. So try, if you hear something that goes, oh, that's interesting, that I could be part of that conversation, or I was just thinking about that, or anything along those lines. That's a message that hasn't happened by accident. That is a message to connect with whatever that means for you, and to consider what you need to do with that bit of information. And then just lastly is the events that happen around you. And I've probably got a couple of examples of this, of just both seeing the synchronicities out there. I mean, a very simple example, and maybe there's a message in this that I don't know, other than just going, you can't tell me that the life we're living isn't laid out in some way by the divine. We were driving home the other week from somewhere, who let the dogs out came on the car stereo system just as this dog walked out of its front fence without any owner and started crossing the road. And I was like, what has just happened? So again, there might have been a message there for me. I didn't take it other than just going, yes, universe, I know you are in control of exactly what is happening to us, and that there are those synchronicities that happen in our each and everyday life. But some of the events that happen to us are also messages, or are also asking us to connect with what we were just thinking about, where we're at, what we're trying to process. And a beautiful, maybe, example of this happened to me this week. I've had actually a number of messages this week in different forms that are just saying, slow down, Donna. Just slow down. Stop trying to rush this. Stop trying to control this. Stop trying to put your expectations on top of this. This is all unfolding as it's meant to. And for me, that's around my spiritual journey and my spiritual awakening, and what I'm expecting this to look like versus what it's currently looking like, and me wanting to excel at this, which is in itself ludicrous, but is my ego, is my personality, is my approach to things in life. And so the universe is just going, Donna, slow down. An example of this week is I was driving to work and I was thinking about exactly that. Like, I've just done my Reiki training last weekend. More about that shortly. Just done my Reiki training last weekend. What do I need to be doing next? What's the next thing I need to be doing to opening myself up to this pathway, opening my gifts up, opening up what I'm meant to be doing? And I was thinking that as I was driving around, I was coming up to a roundabout, and as I've gone to go around the roundabout, I've realised a car was about to come and T-bone me. Thankfully it didn't get that message within that split second, because then as I've come off the roundabout, I've almost run up the back of another car. Both totally my fault. Both thankfully didn't happen. And I just knew straight away that was a message of slow down. And I thought at first that was a message of stop rushing to work. Yes, you're a bit late, but stop rushing. You're not meant to rush right now. And then as I drove a little bit further, I was just thinking about all of what I needed to do next, all of what how this isn't unfolding how I was expecting it to. What do I need to do next to make this unfold the way I'm expecting it to? And I laughed. I actually laughed because I was like, okay, universe, like, message received. Yes, don't rush in your drive to work, but also just stop rushing this process. Stop expecting that because that person's journey looks like this and that person's journey looks like that yours is meant to look the same. Because again, the angel numbers, every day I'm getting messages that I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, doing what I'm meant to be doing. Most days I'm still getting frustrated that something isn't happening. I'm struggling with my meditation. I'm struggling with my Reiki practice. I'm feeling disconnected from this or that. But I'm where I'm meant to be. I'm doing the work. I'm turning up and honoring my spiritual practices. And that's all I need to do. So the events that happen around us also have a message. And it probably kind of links back into last episode where I said the universe will give us not what we want, but what we need. And we need to look at things as this isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. And now all of our paths, all of our journeys are different. And so what are the messages out there for you to help you connect to, and where you need, help you trust your intuition, help you trust that inner knowing is guiding you exactly where you're meant to go. Now, I hope some of those things help you. I'd love to hear, for any of you that already have ways in which you do this, I'd love to hear your ideas, because I'm really open to other ways that this can show up for us as well. These are just some of the things that I've noticed in my life and have really, really, really helped me. What I want to move on to next is this idea of sharing our spiritual journey and sharing our spiritual path openly with others. And as I just mentioned, and those of you that follow me on Instagram might have seen, last weekend I went and completed my level 1 Reiki training. And I did that with 2 beautiful women who absolutely were meant to be at that training with each other. There's no doubt in my mind that we had past experiences that were so aligned that we were meant to be there and do this work together and continue to connect and do this work together. And a beautiful facilitator that could reflect to us, not just deliver her beautiful training, but reflect to us what we had all been longing for in our hearts. So it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I was going to go secretly. I wasn't going to tell a soul, not a soul, that I had been and done that course. Because the truth is, as a vet, I have probably joked about those kind of practices too many times. Honestly, too many times. I've said many, many times, or joked many, many times, that I had healing hands. And I do reflect now and wonder if 2 things: if there was some openness to me to those ideas and just making those jokes, where there's smoke, there's fire. Maybe there was some curiosity there for me. When I first decided I wanted to become a vet, I wanted to be a holistic vet, and really going through the degree and embedding yourself in the science of it all, kind of like life pushes that out of you and tells you things have to be black and white and this way. And the other joke we made whilst at the training was, look at, like, I'm here at Reiki training. The universe had this planned for me. Whatever's meant to come of this, I was meant to be here to show myself that not only could I be open, but actually just to open my mind to the power of our bodies, our energy, our connection to source, in also providing healing of all kinds to, I was going to say living beings, but I don't think it's just living beings. I think living beings and the earth. And so during that day, we spoke a little bit, very briefly, about how scary it is to share this part of ourselves with the world, with those that have known us to be the past versions of ourselves. And it is, for me, it's terrifying. For me, in some ways, I feel like someone's going to come and knock on my door one day and go, you can no longer do your job because you're into this stuff, and therefore we can't trust you to lead a medical facility. So it's really scary, and probably even more so, it's connected with one of my biggest wounds and places that I need to do the work, is my fear of turning up authentically in whatever that means, not just in this sense, but turning up authentically in a connection with someone and having that connection put at risk, having that connection broken, having that person judge me or no longer want to be in my life in the same way. That's a huge one for me, and a big part of why I was resistant to share this part of my journey, share the Reiki training, and even in last podcast and in today's podcast, to be so open and vulnerable about all of these things that I'm being open to, that I'm being guided by, that I'm connecting to. It's huge and it's terrifying, and it helped me to know in that conversation that it wasn't just me, it's not just me that's scared of this. And one of the women in that group shared that she'd been told recently that 30% of the population is spiritual. And I went, what? Am I just swimming in this sea of people that aren't connected with this truly? Or are there people around me that, like me, are terrified of sharing their truth, are terrified of sharing what they're exploring, are terrified of showing up authentically for fear of being judged? And I think there's probably certain circles where that's an even bigger risk. And so when I got home from that training, I went, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? Because my deepest desire is to have deep, meaningful, safe connections with other people. That's my biggest longing. That is what I want. I've sat down this morning and I've done my full moon ritual for the Cancer full moon this morning, right now actually. And that was exactly what my heart told me its deepest desire was. To be seen and to be held for being authentically myself, and to be loved and honoured for that, and to be open to receive that love. And that's the work I've got to do, because I don't know if I've got an example of that, and that's no one else's fault but mine. Because how can I be loved and accepted and honoured for who and what I am without turning up as who and what I am, without breaking down those walls, without letting go of that fear? And so I shared that I had done this, and I'm sharing much more openly on this podcast than I thought I was going to. And another part that came up in that conversation last weekend with those beautiful women is the idea of a witch wound. And it is an idea that I have read a little bit about, and it's popped up in my recent pathway, and I've resonated with because of my resistance to sharing where I'm at and what I'm doing. And it's this idea that many of us, if not all of us, that are currently on this path or have been on this path for a long time, more than likely had past lives where we were also on similar paths, where we were also on spiritual paths. And I'm sure we're all aware of the history around that, and about how women who were connected to spirituality, who were connected to things like the moon and cycles, who were connected to magic, were treated, were ostracized, and in some cases were killed. And what I'm coming to better understand is the idea that we bring wounds and karma from our past lives into our current lives. And we have the opportunity to heal those wounds and release that karma if we're willing to open up to it and see it and face it and work through it. So our wounds that we're working through in this lifetime are not just ours from this lifetime, but they're also those from our past lives, and they're also those of our ancestors. And by doing this healing work, by being open, we can heal not just ourselves, but all of those versions of ourselves and all of those versions of our past loved ones and ancestors. I've gone a little bit off tangent there, but yeah, the idea of a witch wound and how that shows up for us today and how that is holding us back when really we are safe. The worst thing that's going to happen, at least in the place in which I live, is that people might talk behind my back. People might stop wanting to interact with me in the same way. That's all. I'm not going to be killed. I'm not going to be sent out to live in, I don't know where. At least not right now. And the reality of that is, if that's the worst that can happen, that's not the connections I want anyway. I'm looking for those deep, meaningful, authentic connections that are grounded in seeing and holding me for who I am and me being able to do that for other people. And to do that, I have to be me. And so I'm sharing openly, not just to help me find my soul family, help me find those connections, help me make those connections, but also to really start to push those of you that are interested, even in the tiniest way, to start to open up to this. Because I think, based on a lot of what I'm reading and hearing and exploring right now, is our world is shifting in this way. And this shift is part of our journey. We're here on the earth at this point in time for this very reason. And my understanding is that those of us that have the ability to open up to this more now might have I was going to say easier journey. I'm not sure if that's true, because I think this might be hard regardless of what opens you up, what causes your dark night of the soul, what causes your spiritual awakening. But I think there might be some peace in what's to come for our earth, for those of us that are starting to open up to this. And I don't say that to instill fear at all. I just, even in things that we're all very, very aware of, the wars going on, artificial intelligence, we need to be asking ourselves these questions. We need to be connecting with our intuition. We're going to need to trust ourselves to navigate the world that is to come. And so, whilst I am sharing much more openly and vulnerably than I thought I needed to, than I thought I was meant to on this podcast, I know there's something here, not just for me, but for those of you that might be listening that resonate with this message in some way. I think the other part in this space is I'm viewing this a bit as if this is all new to me, but the reality is, and I see this in my daughter now, is that we're born much more connected and open to this idea than we usually are by the time we're adults, unless we have loved ones that help support and nurture us remaining open to this. And I saw this beautiful quote on Instagram this week, and it's along the lines of finding yourself is reconnecting to the child version of yourself before the world got its hands on you. And I can see so much truth there, so much truth. I think back and reflect on the things that I was interested in as a child, the things that drew my attention. that's as simple as loving going into the crystal shops, having dream catchers hanging on my window, simple things like that, but also just the things I was interested in, the things my imagination was drawn to, walking past a creek and imagining that that's where fairies lived. Being really, really interested in ancient Egypt and the Roman and Greek gods and goddesses. Really interested. For someone that's just not a history person at all, those areas were of real interest to me. And I'm even starting to reflect on now, why? What is it about that was so interesting to me? Do I have a calling to go there now? Maybe. And or did I have a past life in those spaces? Was I drawn to those Roman and Greek god and goddesses because there are now entities there that I'm meant to be working with in this life and connecting with their wisdom, their guidance, their power? So yeah, maybe even starting to look at, what was I interested in as a child before the world tried to tell me this was just foolish kid nonsense, this was just my imagination, whatever it might be? What was there for you? Is there something there that you can start to uncover, to reconnect with that inner part of yourself, to reconnect with your inner knowing that was much more innately and naturally there for you as a child? I hope that this has helped. I know it's been a big one, lots to unpack, and we really, really, really went there today in terms of the unknown and the what ifs. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on what resonated, what didn't resonate, even what triggered you. I would just love to hear from you where you're at, how this is helping, what you would like to hear more of. I'm going to continue to turn up and record these episodes again. Right now they're based on my experiences, my intuition, what I'm being called to share. But if there is a particular topic that you would love to hear more on, I'm very happy to consider whether I'm the best person to deliver that message or to connect you with another source of that information. Thank you, everyone, again, sending you loads of love and light. And until next week, be kind to yourselves, be gentle with yourselves, and be open. Bye.